The machine stood 300 meters tall. It was made of dark metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. The Galactic Coalition had spent 50 years building it, pouring the resources of 100 worlds into its creation. They called it the Ironclad, and it was meant to end wars. Commander stood on the observation platform and looked up at the giant. He was a tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes that could see in spectrums other species could not imagine. His people were considered among the in the galaxy. They had helped design the Ironclad, and now they watched it sit useless in its hangar like a statue. The problem was simple to explain but impossible to solve. The Ironclad needed 10 pilots to operate, not because it was poorly designed but because it was too well designed. Every system was connected to every other system. The weapons talked to the shields talked to the sensors talked to the movement controls. To fly the machine, a pilot had to understand all of these connections at once. No single mind could do it. So the designers had split the work. 10 pilots, each controlling one system. They would link their minds through a neural interface and work as one. It was a beautiful idea. It did not work. Turned away from the window and walked to his desk. Reports were piled there, each one describing another failure. Team 7 had achieved 40% synchronization before 2 pilots suffered neural burnout. Team 12 had reached 55%, the highest ever, before the strain caused the lead pilot to have a seizure. Team 17 had not even made it past the initial connection phase. The war against the collective was not going well. There were insect-like beings who fought in massive swarms. They did not care about individual losses. They would throw 1,000 ships at a target and accept 900 deaths if it meant victory. The coalition could not match their numbers. The Ironclad was supposed to change that. One machine that could fight like a fleet. But the machine needed pilots, and the pilots kept failing. His communicator buzzed. He pressed the button with one long finger. "Commander, we have picked up a distress signal," said the voice on the other end. "A small freighter, human registration. It is under attack by raiders about 2 hours from our position." His upper eyes blinked while his lower eyes stayed focused on the reports. Humans. They were new to the coalition, having made first contact only 30 years ago. They were not impressive by galactic standards. They lived short lives, had no natural telepathy, and their bodies were soft and easily damaged. Most coalition species considered them unremarkable at best. "Send a rescue shuttle," said. "We cannot ignore a distress call." "Yes, Commander." Went back to his reports. He did not think about the humans again. 2 hours later, the rescue shuttle returned. It carried one survivor, a man named Danny Cole. He was of average height, with brown hair that was turning gray at the edges and lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting at stars through cockpit windows. He was 38 years old, which was young for most coalition species, but already middle-aged for a human. Danny sat in the medical bay and let the doctors check him over. He had a few burns and a cut on his forehead, but nothing serious. His freighter was gone, destroyed by the raiders, along with 3 months of cargo and his only way of making a living. But he was alive, and that was more than many could say after a raider attack. A young doctor with blue skin and 3 arms finished scanning him. "You are healthy," she said. "You may rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we will arrange transport to the nearest human station." "Thank you," Danny said. He meant it. He had expected to die out there, alone in the black between stars. Instead, he was sitting on clean sheets with a bandage on his head, breathing recycled air that smelled faintly of flowers. He could not sleep. His mind kept replaying the attack, the moment when his shields failed and the hull started to tear. So he got up and walked. The station was massive. It was built around the Ironclad, which meant most of it was empty space designed to hold the giant machine. Danny wandered through corridors that seemed too big, past doors that led to rooms he did not understand. He was not trying to go anywhere. He just needed to move. He turned a corner and stopped. The ironclad filled his vision. He was standing at the base of its hangar, looking up at something that should not exist. It was beautiful and terrible, a thing made for destruction but shaped with care. Danny had seen warships before. He had seen stations and satellites and all the metal that species threw into the void. He had never seen anything like this. "You should not be here." Danny turned. A woman stood behind him, young, with red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a technician's uniform with a human flag on the shoulder. Her name tag said Marsh. "Sorry," Danny said. "I was just walking, could not sleep." Looked at him, then at the ironclad, then back at him. Her expression softened. "I understand, first time seeing it." "Yes. It does that to people." She walked up to stand beside him. 50 years of work, the greatest weapon ever built, and it just sits here doing nothing. "Why?" Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because no one can fly it. It needs 10 pilots working together, their minds linked through a neural interface. Every team that tries either fails to connect or burns out within minutes. The alien brains cannot handle it. They came closest, but even they could not manage more than 55% synchronization." Danny looked at the machine. He thought about the freighter he had just lost, about the controls he had worked for 20 years. He had flown everything from old crop dusters on Earth to modern cargo haulers in deep space. He had learned to feel a ship, to know when something was wrong before the instruments told him. "Why 10 pilots?" he asked. "Why not one?" Stared at him. "Because one brain cannot process that much information. It would be like asking someone to read 10 books at the same time while also running a marathon and playing chess. The mind just cannot do it." Danny nodded slowly. He did not say anything else, but something stirred in the back of his mind, a question he was not yet ready to ask. He thanked and went back to the medical bay. This time he slept. He dreamed of giants. Danny woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed in the medical bay and voices shouted in languages he did not understand. He sat up quickly, his heart pounding, thinking the raiders had found him again. A nurse rushed past his bed. She had green skin and eyes that took up half her face. "Stay here," she said. "It is just another pilot failure, nothing dangerous." Danny relaxed, but only a little. He got dressed and left the medical bay, following the noise. He found Marsh standing outside a room filled with medical equipment. Through the window, he could see 3 figures lying on beds, their heads connected to machines by thin wires. Doctors moved around them with quick, worried movements. "What happened?" Danny asked. Did not look surprised to see him. Her face was tired, the kind of tired that came from watching the same thing happen over and over. Team 18 tried to synchronize this morning. They made it to 37% before 2 of them had seizures. The third is in shock. They will live, but their pilot days are over. "How many teams have tried?" 18 now, more than 160 pilots total. Some of them will never fully recover. Pressed her hand against the glass. And they keep pushing closer. 3 more colonies fell last month. The council is getting desperate. Danny thought about what she had told him the night before. 10 pilots working together, their minds linked. He thought about the way she had laughed when he asked why one person could not do it alone. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "These pilots, the ones who try, what happens to them exactly? What makes their brains fail?" Turned to look at him. Her eyes were sharp, studying him like he was a puzzle she had not expected. The neural interface feeds information directly into the brain. When 10 systems are active, that is 10 streams of data. It is like trying to listen to 10 conversations at once while also doing complex math. Most brains cannot separate the streams. They get overwhelmed, and the result is neural overload. But some pilots do better than others. Yes, they have 4-lobed brains, which helps them process multiple streams. They have come the closest, but even their best teams hit a wall around 50% synchronization. Something always breaks down. Danny nodded slowly. He was thinking about something from his past, something he had not told anyone in years. When he was 12 years old, doctors on Earth had discovered something strange about his brain. The different regions were connected in ways they should not have been. Signals crossed paths that normally stayed separate. The doctors had called it a disorder and given it a long name he could not remember. They said it might cause problems later in life. It never did. Instead, Danny found he could do things other people struggled with. He could listen to music while reading while having a conversation, and actually pay attention to all three. He could fly a ship and monitor 6 different instrument panels at once without feeling overwhelmed. His brain did not process information the normal way. It found shortcuts, made connections, treated everything as part of one big picture instead of separate pieces. He had always thought it was just a weird quirk. Now he wondered if it was something more. He said carefully, "What would happen if someone tried to pilot the ironclad alone?" She laughed just like before. "They would die, or worse, end up brain dead. The interface is not designed for one person to receive all 10 data streams. It would be like drinking from a fire hose." But theoretically, if someone's brain was different, if they could handle all the streams at once. Stopped laughing. She looked at him with new eyes, the eyes of a scientist seeing something unexpected. "That is not possible. No known species has that capability. The processing power required is beyond any organic brain we have ever studied." "Have you studied many humans?" The question hung in the air between them. The mouth opened, then closed. She had worked on this project for 3 years. She had seen and a dozen other species try and fail. She had never considered humans because everyone knew humans were not special. They were just the new species, the primitive ones who had barely left their own solar system before making contact. "Danny," she said slowly, "what are you not telling me?" He told her. He explained about the doctors and the diagnosis, about the way his brain worked differently, about the things he could do that seemed impossible to others. Listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This could be nothing," she said finally. "Your brain might be unusual for a human, but that does not mean it could handle the ironclad. The scale is completely different." "I know. If you tried and failed, you could die, or spend the rest of your life unable to remember your own name." "I know that too." Studied him, why would you risk that? Danny thought about the colonies that had fallen. He thought about the families on those worlds, the children who had looked up at the sky and seen death coming. He thought about his own freighter, destroyed by raiders who knew no one would stop them. "Because someone has to try," he said, "and I might be the only one who can." Took him to Commander. The listened to their proposal with all 4 eyes narrowed. His long fingers tapped against his desk in a rhythm that might have been impatience or thought. When they finished speaking, he was silent for what felt like a very long time. "This is foolish," he said at last. "Humans are not suited for neural interface work. Your species has no telepathy, no enhanced processing capability, no evolutionary adaptations for this kind of task. You are asking me to let a cargo pilot attempt something that has defeated the finest minds in the coalition." "Yes, sir," Danny said. "That is exactly what I am asking." His upper eyes blinked. "You understand you will likely die." "I understand I might. I also understand that right now the ironclad is useless, and useless is the same as dead." The commander looked at him for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sigh. "Very well, human. Tomorrow morning you will attempt the interface test. If you survive the first 30 seconds, we will continue. If not, I will have your body sent back to Earth with a note explaining that you were very brave and very stupid." Danny smiled. "Thank you, Commander, that is all I ask." He did not sleep that night either, but this time it was not fear that kept him awake. It was hope. The pilot chamber was located in the chest of the ironclad, behind layers of armor that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. Danny rode a lift up through the giant's body, watching metal walls pass by on either side. He tried not to think about how small he was compared to the machine. He tried not to think about all the pilots who had sat in this same chamber and come out broken. Met him at the entrance. She wore a white coat now, the uniform of the science team. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking slightly as she held a data pad. "The interface will connect to your brain through 10 neural links," she explained. "Each link carries data from one of the ironclad's major systems. When all 10 are active, you will experience something no single pilot has ever experienced. We do not know exactly what that will feel like." "Probably not comfortable," Danny said. Did not smile. "If your brain starts to overload, we will shut down the interface immediately. But there may be damage before we can react. The neural patterns can change very quickly." "I understand." "Do you, really?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Danny, I have watched 18 teams try this. I have seen pilots who could speak 5 languages forget how to say their own names. I have seen mathematicians who can no longer count to 10. The interface does not just hurt, it breaks people." Danny looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Hope. The same hope that had kept him awake all night. "Then let us hope I am hard to break," he said. He walked into the pilot chamber. The room was circular, with a single chair in the center. The chair was surrounded by equipment, screens and sensors and machines whose purpose Danny could not guess. Above the chair, 10 thin cables hung from the ceiling, each one ending in a small device that looked almost like a crown. Commander's voice came through a speaker. "Human, this is your last chance to reconsider. No one will think less of you if you walk away." Danny sat down in the chair. "Then let us give them something to think about." There was a pause, then said, "Begin the interface sequence." The cables descended. Danny felt them touch his head, 10 points of cold metal against his skull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the first link activated and the world changed. He could see the hangar, not through his own eyes but through the ironclad sensors. He saw standing at the observation window, her hand pressed against the glass. He saw the technicians at their stations, watching their screens with wide eyes. He saw everything in perfect detail, sharper than his human eyes had ever managed. The second link activated. Suddenly he could feel the ironclad shields, a layer of energy surrounding the machine like a second skin. He could sense every fluctuation, every ripple in the field. It was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Third link. The weapons systems came online. He felt the plasma cannons charging, the missile bays waiting, the close-range defense turrets tracking imaginary targets. Each weapon was like a finger on a hand he had never known he had. Fourth link, movement controls. He felt the ironclad's legs, massive pillars of metal and hydraulics. He felt the arms, the joints, the delicate balance that kept 300 meters of war machine standing upright. He wanted to move, to walk, to run. He forced himself to stay still. Fifth link, sixth, seventh. Each one added more: power distribution, communication arrays, targeting systems, life support. The data poured into his brain like water from a broken dam, and Danny understood why other pilots had failed. This was not like flying a freighter. This was not like anything. It was everything. Alarms started screaming. Through the speaker he heard shouting orders. His neural patterns are spiking beyond safe levels. Shut it down. Shut it down now. But Danny was not listening. He was too busy learning. His brain did something it had been doing all his life, the thing the doctors had called a disorder. It stopped treating the 10 data streams as separate things and started treating them as one. The sensors talked to the weapons, which talked to the targeting, which talked to the movement controls. Everything was connected. Everything was part of a larger whole. Danny had spent 20 years flying ships. He knew what it felt like to become one with a machine, to feel the hull as his body and the engines as his heart. This was that feeling by 1,000. He was not inside the ironclad. He was the ironclad. The 8th link activated, the 9th, the 10th. For a moment that lasted forever, Danny Cole was a giant. Then his eyes snapped open, and his voice came through every speaker in the hangar, calm and steady despite everything. "I can see everything. Give me a minute." In the observation room was crying. She did not know why. Fear maybe, or relief, or something else entirely. Commander stood frozen, his 4 eyes wide. The monitors showed Danny's neural activity, and the readings made no sense. His brain should have been overwhelmed. It should have shut down or burned out or simply stopped working. Instead, it was humming along at a level of activity no one had ever recorded, processing all 10 data streams simultaneously. "This is impossible," one of the scientists whispered. "Run the diagnostics again," ordered. "There must be an error." There was no error. The readings were accurate. Danny Cole, a human cargo pilot with a brain that worked differently than it should, was doing what 160 pilots before him could not. He was flying the ironclad alone. In the hangar, the giant moved. It started small, just a shift in weight from one foot to the other. Then an arm rose slowly, carefully, like a man waking from a long sleep and testing his limbs. The fingers flexed. The head turned, sensors sweeping across the room. Danny took a step. The whole station shook. He took another. Engineers ran for cover as the ironclad walked across the hangar, each footfall sending tremors through the floor. But there was no damage, no accidents, no systems failing or overloading. Danny moved with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. He stopped in the center of the hangar and stood still. Then, slowly, the ironclad raised one hand and gave a thumbs up to the observation window. Laughed through her tears. Commander made a sound that might have been shock or disbelief or the beginning of something like respect. "How do you feel?" asked through the communicator. Danny's voice came back, and even through the speakers she could hear the wonder in it. "I feel big." In that moment, everything changed. The war against the was not over. The coalition still faced terrible odds, but they had something now that they had not had before. They had a human who could do the impossible. And somewhere in the back of his giant new mind, Danny Cole smiled and thought about what came next. The call came 3 weeks later. Danny had spent that time learning the ironclad, pushing its systems to their limits, discovering what his new body could do. He had fired every weapon, tested every shield configuration, and walked across the testing grounds until the engineers stopped flinching at each step. He was ready. He did not know how ready he would need to be. Commander called him to the briefing room. Was there, along with a dozen senior officers from different species. Their faces were grim. On the main screen, a planet hung in the darkness of space, blue and green and beautiful. "Nexus 7, said. "Population 40 million. It is a farming world, no military value. 3 days ago, the collective sent a fleet to destroy it." Danny studied the screen. Red dots surrounded the planet, thousands of them. How many ships? 4,000 combat vessels, 3 capital ships. Estimated drone count is in the tens of thousands. Paused. The coalition fleet is 3 days away. The planet will be dead in 1. The room was silent. 40 million people, and no one close enough to help. No one except the station they were standing on and the giant waiting in its hangar. "How fast can the ironclad reach Nexus 7? Danny asked. 6 hours by emergency transport. His 4 eyes met Danny's too. "I am not ordering you to go. This is not what the ironclad was designed for. You would be facing an entire armada alone. The odds of survival are very low." Danny thought about the families on that planet, the children who would never grow up, the farmers who had spent their lives making food for colonies across the sector. He thought about his own parents, long dead now, who had raised him on a farm in Kansas before he left Earth to find something more. 6 hours, he said. That means we leave now. Grabbed his arm as he turned to go. I am coming with you. No, this is not your fight. You need someone in there with you, not to help pilot but to keep you grounded. The interface connects your brain to the machine. After 6 hours of combat, you might forget where the machine ends and you begin. You need an anchor. Danny wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She was right. He had felt it during training, the way his sense of self started to blur when he stayed connected too long. Having another human voice might be the difference between coming back as Danny Cole and coming back as something else. Fine, he said, but you stay in the secondary seat, no risks. They loaded the ironclad onto a transport ship and launched within the hour. The journey was quiet. Danny stayed disconnected from the interface, saving his strength for what was coming. Sat beside him, running last-minute diagnostics on systems she only half understood. Are you scared? She asked. Yes. Good, scared people are careful. Careful people survive. Danny smiled. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It is supposed to make you come back alive. They dropped out of hyperspace above Nexus 7. The sight that greeted them stole Danny's breath. The fleet filled the sky, a swarm of metal and death that blotted out the stars. The capital ships were mountains of darkness, each one large enough to hold a small city. And between them, thousands of smaller vessels moved like insects, weapons firing at the planet below. Whispered something under her breath that might have been a prayer. Danny connected to the interface. The world expanded. He felt the ironclad come alive around him, systems powering up, weapons charging, shields flickering into existence. He saw through 1,000 sensors, heard through a dozen communication channels, felt every vibration of the transport ship beneath his feet. Deploying now, he said. His voice was calm, steadier than he felt. Hold on. The transport bay doors opened. The ironclad stepped out into the void. There was no gravity here, no up or down, just endless black and the lights of enemy ships. Danny activated the thrust systems and dove toward the planet. Behind him, the transport ship turned and ran. It was not built for combat. Neither, if he was honest, was he. But here he was anyway. They noticed him immediately. 100 fighters broke formation and swept toward the strange new contact. Danny felt them coming, saw their weapons charging, calculated their trajectories in a part of his brain that had not existed 3 weeks ago. He moved. The ironclad was not supposed to be graceful. It was 300 meters of war machine, built for power rather than speed. But Danny did not care what it was supposed to be. He twisted between plasma bolts, spinning the giant body like a dancer, and came out of the spin with both arms raised. The plasma cannons fired. 2 fighters vanished in balls of fire. 3 more followed. The rest scattered, suddenly aware that they were not facing a clumsy target. Danny pushed forward, deeper into the swarm. Fighters came at him from every direction, and he destroyed them one by one. His shields absorbed the hits he could not dodge, energy flickering across the ironclad's skin like lightning. He felt each impact as a dull ache, there and gone, and kept moving. Danny said, her voice tight with fear, "There are too many." "I know. What do we do?" "We do not stop." He reached the first capital ship. It was 3 times his size, bristling with weapons that could crack a moon. The commanders had never seen anything like the ironclad. They did not know what it could do. Danny showed them. He landed on the capital ship's hull and started walking. Point defense turrets tried to track him, but he was too fast, too unpredictable. He reached the main weapon array and tore it free with his bare hands. Metal screamed. The ship shuddered. Danny kicked off and launched himself toward the engine section, where he drove both fists through the armor and ripped out everything he could reach. The capital ship died slowly, systems failing one by one, until it began to fall toward the planet it had come to destroy. Danny was already gone, moving to the next target. Hours passed. Danny lost track of time. He lost track of everything except the fight, the endless dance of destruction that consumed his world. Fighters fell by the hundreds. The second capital ship went down when he used a damaged cruiser as a battering ram. The third tried to run, and he chased it until his weapons tore through its bridge. They fought back with everything they had. Danny took hits that should have killed him. His shields failed 3 times, and each time he redistributed power from somewhere else, sacrificing sensors or weapons or life support to keep the barriers up. His body inside the chamber was drenched in sweat, his heart racing, his lungs burning. But the ironclad kept moving. Talked to him constantly. She told him stories about her childhood, about her family, about the first time she saw the stars. She reminded him of his name, his home, the color of Earth's sky at sunset. She kept him human while his mind stretched across the machine. 6 hours after the battle began, the Coalition fleet arrived. They found the Armada in ruins. Broken ships drifted through space, their crews dead or fleeing. The planet below was untouched, 40 million people saved by one machine and the human inside it. In the middle of the battlefield, standing on the wreckage of a capital ship, the ironclad was still. "Danny," whispered. "Danny, can you hear me?" For a long moment there was no response. Then slowly, the giant's head turned toward her voice. "I hear you," Danny said. His voice was exhausted, barely more than a whisper. "I hear you, I am still here." He disconnected from the interface. The world shrank back to normal size, and Danny Cole was just a man again, sitting in a chair, too tired to move. But he was alive, and so were 40 million others. That was enough. Danny slept for 3 days. His body had pushed itself beyond all reasonable limits, and now it demanded rest. Stayed by his bedside, leaving only when the doctors forced her to eat or sleep herself. Commander came to check on him twice each day, standing in the doorway with his 4 eyes fixed on the small human who had done the impossible. On the 4th day, Danny woke up. The first thing he saw was face, tired but smiling. The second thing he saw was the ceiling of a medical bay, white and clean and wonderfully boring. He was not inside a giant anymore. He was just himself. "How do you feel?" asked. Danny thought about it. His body ached in places he did not know could ache. His head felt like someone had filled it with sand. But beneath all of that there was something else. Peace, maybe, or satisfaction. "Hungry?" he said. Laughed, a real laugh this time, full of relief. "I will get you something. Do not go anywhere." "I do not think I could move if I wanted to." She left, and Danny lay there, staring at the ceiling. Memories of the battle came back to him in fragments. The swarm of fighters, the capital ships falling, the constant stream of weapons fire that he had dodged or absorbed or simply ignored. It felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. But it had happened to him, and he had survived. Commander entered the room a few minutes later. He stood at the foot of Danny's bed, his tall frame casting a shadow across the sheets. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "The Coalition Council has been in emergency session since the battle ended," said finally. "They want to know how you did it. They want to know if other humans can do the same thing." Danny sat up slowly, wincing at the protest from his muscles. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that I do not know." Upper eyes blinked while his lower ones stayed fixed on Danny. "You should have died. Every model, every calculation, every piece of scientific understanding we have says that your brain should have burned out within minutes. Instead, you fought for 6 hours and walked away. I have no explanation for this. Maybe your models are wrong. Perhaps," the commander paused, "or perhaps humans are more than we realized." Danny did not know what to say to that. He had spent his whole life being ordinary. A farmer's son who became a pilot, nothing special, nothing remarkable. The idea that he represented something larger, something important about his entire species, was too big to fit in his head. Returned with food and left them alone. Danny ate in silence, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that might happen next. The news spread quickly. Within a week, every station and colony in Coalition space knew the story of Nexus 7. A human had done what no other species could. A single pilot had controlled a weapon designed for 10 and used it to destroy an armada. The details grew with each telling, as stories always do, until Danny Cole became less a man and more a legend. Other humans started coming forward. Some had brains like Danny's, unusual wiring that let them process information in unexpected ways. Others were simply curious, wanting to know if they too could touch the impossible. The Coalition began testing them, carefully at first, then with growing excitement as the results came in. Not every human could pilot the ironclad. Most could not even come close, but some could, and that was enough to change everything. The collective watched these developments with growing concern. They had built their entire strategy around overwhelming numbers, throwing waves of ships and drones at targets until nothing remained. The ironclad changed that calculation. A single machine could hold back an armada. A single human could pilot that machine. Suddenly, the math did not work in their favor anymore. 3 months after Nexus 7, they sent a message requesting peace talks. Danny did not attend the negotiations. He did not want to. He had done what needed to be done, but he had no interest in politics or treaties or the careful dance of diplomacy. That was work for other people, people who understood such things. He just wanted to fly. The Coalition gave him a new freighter, better than the one the Raiders had destroyed. They offered him medals and ceremonies, and a position in the military with enough rank to make his head spin. He turned down everything except the ship. Found him in the hangar the day before he left, loading supplies into the cargo hold. She watched him work for a while, not saying anything, just being there. "You could stay," she said finally. "The Coalition would give you anything you wanted, a home, a title, a place in history." Danny set down the crate he was carrying. "I already have a place in history. Whether I want it or not, people will remember what happened at Nexus 7. But that does not mean I have to spend the rest of my life being reminded of it." "So you are just going to go back to hauling cargo?" "It is what I know. It is what I am good at." He smiled, a small smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Besides, someone has to keep the supplies moving. Wars end, but people still need to eat." Stepped closer. "Will I see you again?" "The galaxy is big, but it is not that big. Our paths will cross." Danny looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the woman who had kept him human during the worst fight of his life. "Thank you for everything. I would not have made it without you." "Yes, you would have. You are too stubborn to die." "Maybe, but it would have been a lot harder." They said their goodbyes, and Danny flew away. He did not look back. He had learned a long time ago that looking back only made leaving harder. The years passed. The war with the ended and new challenges arose, as they always do. The Coalition grew and changed, welcoming new species, facing new threats. Humans became more than the unremarkable newcomers they had once been seen as. They took positions of leadership, pushed the boundaries of what was possible, proved again and again that their strange, adaptable brains could do things no one expected. And through it all, stories were told about the human who had piloted the ironclad alone. Children of 100 species grew up hearing about Danny Cole, the cargo pilot who became a giant. The details changed with each telling, but the heart of the story remained the same. When everyone said it was impossible, a human did it anyway. Danny heard these stories sometimes, in bars on distant stations or markets on colony worlds. He never corrected them, never claimed the glory, never admitted that he was the man in the legend. He would just smile, finish his drink, and move on to the next job. But sometimes, late at night, when his freighter was drifting between stars and the galaxy stretched out before him in all its terrible beauty, Danny would think about that day. He would remember what it felt like to be 300 meters tall, to hold the power of a fleet in his hands, to stand between death and 40 million lives and say no. It had been terrifying. It had been wonderful. It had been the greatest moment of his life. And he had walked away from it because being a legend was never the point. The point was doing what needed to be done, then getting back to the work of living. That was what humans did. That was what made them special. Not the power they could hold, but the grace with which they let it go. Somewhere in Coalition space, the ironclad waited in its hangar, ready for the next pilot brave enough to try. And somewhere else, Danny Cole flew his freighter through the endless dark, carrying cargo and stories and the quiet knowledge that he had once been something more. He did not need to be a giant anymore. He had proven what needed to be proven. And that was enough.